Aloha, everybody, and welcome back. This is Marissa Indigo of Divine DNA Blueprint, and I am so excited today. We have a beautiful guest, one of my lovely friends, Julie Dhara Roberts, and we're going to be talking about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Marissa.
We're going to be talking about grid work today, and I'm just so excited to share this with you guys. This is such an important time for us to start to embody and understand this beautiful wisdom. This is part of our innate divinity as divine humans here. And so I am in Southern California, and Julie is in Boston. And so we wanted to call this segment today Coast to Coast. And we're going to be hosting this monthly to just check in, coast to coast, grid worker chat, just to see, what's going on with where we are. And really the goal with this conversation is to bring this into a more tangible reality for you to understand that we are all innately grid working all the time. And we're just going to help you add another layer of conscious focused intention to that practice. So now I'm going to stop talking, and I just want to say welcome, Julie, and please, share.
Hi, Marissa. Thanks so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to get to chat with you about these high vibe things and these fun the things that like fill our days and our hearts and our energy fields. So thanks for having me so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. So I know, we talked about a couple things, and I would just love to invite you to share your experience. What are you up to right now? Grid work.
Wide open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We were talking about building to really make grid working more accessible to every person who has it in his or her heart and field, and to work with the energy grids of the planet and how they're a reflection. Marissa was just taught a course about how the grids they're in us, right? We are the grid, like in our energy field. And one of the things I think that we bonded on when we first met is we have similar backgrounds in yoga and Ayurveda. And I feel like that was my 20 years of like deep dive into the energy field of me, and how energy flows and through the nadis and channels. And then when you apply it, then you like move out a station or like a vantage point. You're like, oh, the body of the earth is a body, like a living, breathing body that has its own planetary energy system and grid system, just like my human body does. And I can work with the planetary body in a similar way as I do my human body. And so that's what part of what your practice is very much about that, like, right? Linking the...
Yes. So for me, what I teach is, we have different energy systems for our different bodies, right? So when we're first coming in and we have the 3D system, we have the chakra system, that rainbow chakra system that everyone is really, it's kind of mainstream now. But as we continue to embody heightened states of consciousness and more photonic light, our energy system continues to evolve with that. And there's a certain point, when we're in unity consciousness and really heart-centered, soul-centered living, the 5D and above consciousness, where we're having our full-on Taurus fields activated. And I'll insert some images here for you guys to get a nice visual of that. But when we start to embody and become intimately connected with these energy fields, which they're already a part of us, it's our electromagnetic, it's our bioelectricity, our own conductivity. But with the conscious awareness and intent of starting to work with them through our heightened awareness and sensitivity, we start to see, oh my gosh, I have the same fields as the planetary body. So our bodies, are very similar. And so, Julie and I were talking about, we are the grids. So I just want you guys to know that you are the grids. You have the energy system. You are it. And one of my favorite examples, using a scientific perspective, if we're talking about body work and just, physiology, kinesiology, aspects of the body, you could look at images of your own interstitial fluid web matrix. That's a liquid crystalline matrix in your body, in your own tissue, storing consciousness. And body workers know this. We talk about this in yoga and the cranial sacral and all the different beautiful body modalities of healing, that, oh, wow, the body has a memory. This is our liquid crystalline consciousness, where we could start to look at the body as a computer in a way where it has memory stored within it, stuck energy. These can later on manifest as, illnesses or dis-ease. And that's where we have that lovely Ayurveda connection of what's the root of any outcome, just to kind of look at it. And on that note, so does the planet. The planet and different locations have history. So that's looking at our own individual Akash, our soul Akash as a human person, and that of the planet as well, of Gaia herself. And there are memories, memory banks all over the planet at different dimensional frequencies for us to access. So the more we go inside and connect ourselves into our higher aspects, all from inside, the more access we have to these data banks. Everything is encrypted with vibrational frequency of loving intent, kindness, open-heartedness. And Julie was talking about some stuff that made me so excited about what she's working with right now, where she is, which is also.
Can I interrupt before we segue to that? Like I had a thing.
Yeah.
You're saying it's very. I think this would be a very, tangibilizing. It's not a word.
I hope so. Yes.
But that, the body, when you talk about that different. So if we talk about you said electromagnetic, and in our vernacular we call them the nadis. If you were going to your acupuncturist, he or she would call them the meridians.
That's right.
The energy, the electromagnetic grid of the body, and how they produce. So anytime you move electrons through a cable, through a wire, or through your channels inside, right, you create a magnetic field, which is Marissa was talking about as the torus field, right? And then so I have I can even, if you want to, we can link it if you want, a little article wrote up that us as a light bulb.
Yes. Oh my God,
the old
yes,
fashioned light bulbs,
yes.
It's like, you have the filament. Remember we used to be able to break a light bulb and you could actually have the little, before complex fluorescence, but you have the filament, right? And so the more electrons you pump through that filament, you get more and more heat and more energy flow. There is a magnetic thing, but then you also have the light that just comes from the light bulb. So that's your light body and your light field is intertwined with your electromagnetic field, but it's like a subtler level of the same grid system. And so the planet has that too. So it's almost like which operating system is like your phone or your tablet, your computer is always asking for an upgrade for its operating system, right? It's 13.4 is available, blah, blah, blah. So the Earth grids and our grids work that way too. It's like for a long time that paradigm, you said now it's become commonplace, right? Of the rainbow body and the chakras in our electromagnetic body. And it's not that that's passe or not still great to work with.
Exactly.
But then you get more, your subtle awareness increases, and then you realize that, but there's a subtler level too, and that my light body is operating simultaneously, and in the light of the higher frequency, almost the easier it is to work with things, right? So you work with a physical thing of I have a sore jaw, whatever. And it's you can work with it physically, but then we've learned over the years to I could work the nadis around it, or I could do this yoga pose, or I could eat this diet, or do this to tweak my grids, right? But then it's I can go to the subtle level and work the energy flow around it. Yes. And that's even easier somehow than doing the physical stuff. Or I can go to the light field and you have such a quick, hi kitty, the ability to shift yourself becomes easier, more fun and joy filled, and quicker, that with the
absolutely
higher level. Does that make sense? That's what's
you're saying. I love that. Thank you so much. That's such a great visual.
And so the planetary thing too, I think is a big, it used to be a lot about the magnetic grid system and the pilgrimages to Stonehenge or Machu Picchu, or the traveling to work the magnetic grids. But now I think that for what me and my friends talk about, Gridworker friends, is it's the crystalline light grid has come online as the major operating system of the planet.
That's right.
So the traveling to go here and there is, fine, but that's you don't need to do any of that. You're just in the field of unity, and it's the light grid that we're working with, the crystalline matrix.
It's accessible all the time.
From anywhere.
Yeah. Beautiful.
A good thing too, because we're not traveling right at this juncture. So we have it's almost it's an opportunity. This all this the lockdown or whatnot is really the opportunity for all of us to change our operating systems and to really be I can interface with anywhere I want to be and anything I want to do.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you.
Is that a good tangent?
Yeah.
but we were talking about trying to help people. So we had done a little prep chat before, and I had said, anyone who's watching this video, if you've gotten this far into the video, you are grid working. Like you wouldn't be watching this today if you weren't already doing this with your own heart, mind, soul field. So thank you for doing what you're doing, everyone who's watching this. And
yeah,
it's like, it happens when we're going to the grocery store. It happens when we're dropping the kids off. Remember we used to drop them off at school? We're dropping people off places, or, it happens like in the most, what your human self might consider mundane moments, that you have these kind of epic awareness portals, or whatever you want to call them, open. So you asked me to tell a story of one of the things that I've been working on the last month.
Yeah.
So one of my friends, her daughter is heavily into doing circus arts. And so when they were able to do in-person stuff again, I was giving my friend's daughter a ride to her circus school. And it's not somewhere I usually travel to. And her class was 3 hours. So I was like, oh, I'll make use of this time. I'm away from my kids. And I'm like, I can go for a walk in the woods, or I could do some things. So her circus school is in Ashland, Massachusetts. So I live in Massachusetts, people that don't know me here. And I'm actually in the center of the state, near Worcester. From California, it's Boston. But from here, I'm about an hour drive from Boston. And just north of Boston is Salem, Massachusetts, which probably most people have heard of in some capacity. It's kind of a famous Massachusetts point. And as we're tipping towards October, things in Salem, the whole witch activity gets a little more heightened there. But I was in Ashland, Massachusetts, and just taking a walk through the woods. And, I feel like for myself, I've used the last 20 whatever years of doing yoga, of meditating, of being aware of my fields, as you could take the time where you're on a beautiful walk by a body of water, or just on a trail in the woods, and you start to be able to really tune into the land, the grids, like we were talking about, is the Akash. It's like the memory field of the land it's always speaking to you. But what we do as humans is we tune ourselves to be able to hear, right? So we can really listen to what's happening. So I was in Ashland and walking by the reservoir there, and here, a lot of the trails are originally native travel trails, that have turned into different corridors and travel ways and rivers. And so then I came home and trying to make the story a little short. I came home and did a little bit of research, and I was like, oh, that felt like, and I drove by this road that said Salem End Road. And I was like, why is it called Salem End? And there's a whole part of town that's called Salem End. So this was over a course of several weeks, where I was driving her these Saturday mornings, driving to this circus class. And I was like, great, I'm going to dive into this a little bit. It's like my little mini project. And my in-laws, my husband's family, lives in the next town over from Salem. So I've been going there since I met my husband quite regularly, and have done a lot of grid work there with the Gallows Hill, the sites where, a lot of the slaughtering and the witch trials and graveyards and whatnot there, to work with some of the souls. But when I researched a little bit more, the freedom codes from that, like there's a whole bunch of people. There were these 3 sisters that were imprisoned at the same time, that were accused of witchcraft at the same time. And 2 of them were hung. One of them got away. So like, what was how did she, the freedom codes are the witches that survived. So they're still not quite sure if her husband broke her out of jail, or somebody, how maybe she tunneled out with a spoon. We don't really know how she got out.
Wow.
But she got out and came down to Ashland, which is, on foot in the winter, and hid for the winter in what is called now, these stone sites, is called the Witches' Caves.
Wow.
So it turned out that I was walking on the land near, so like what, just the Salem, like, so when you're driving along and I was also, went to Whole Foods and did some grocery shopping in my 3 hour. I wasn't in the woods the whole time, but I was like multitasking. And, but that things ping you, when you're out in the land. I'm sure it happens to you all the time too, right? It's like, oh,
Thank you. Thank you, because it's such a wonderful way to weave. This is part of making this tangible for you guys, for making it realistic, is that, you're doing the quote unquote mundane, but there's these layers of mysticism to it that you're in the zone, and you're, yeah, you're going to the grocery store, you're getting gas, and then you're called this, or, this street has a really interesting name and there's a code. So it's just it's around the clock organic process of just being and being tuned in, right?
so because it was iterative, meaning I went back to the same, I was like, then I made it more on purpose moves with it.
Awesome.
The first time was just an organic, like, oh, I got pinged by the Salem man. But then when I researched a little, I was like, who knew? Like, nobody's like, in the history books, I don't hear a lot about the ladies who got away.
Right.
You hear about the ones that were. So as we're unlocking all these freedom codes right now, all along the continent, from your coast to mine, that so I drove by the house, like her homestead, so they were in the caves for the winter. And just to even think about that, like, it gets cold here, much colder than where you live.
Yeah.
And that, whoever know, like with pelts and whatever, they were like living in this like little, to call it a cave, I think would be generous. I think it was like a little rock outcropping underneath the situation. And it was one of the governors. So this gentleman's name is Danforth, which anyone who's local in Massachusetts would know. There's a Danforth Museum. Like, he was a plantation, meaning like a big tract of land owner before it was even incorporated as towns here. But he had been one of the judges in the Salem witch trials, but he kind of realized midway through that things weren't, this wasn't a good practice. Right. So he had just left, quit, and moved. So it was his land, whether he helped free her eventually. Wow. But it was his land that he hit on. And then he gave a lot of when the witch trials were ended, which is interesting. This is how it ties into equinox. So the last group of witches that were hung was September 22nd.
Oh, wow.
Pretty sure it was 1962, but I'll have to quote. I didn't go look up. Or 1692. Okay. But it was September 22nd. So for my equinox, like part of what I was working on equinox was like that freedom codes around the end of that level style of persecution. But there was a bunch of women that were still in men that were in jail that then got released. They had to pay a tariff. They had to pay a lot of money for their food and board for being held captive for all that time. But then once they paid, they got to get out. So he gave, this Danforth gentleman, gave a bunch of land on his plantation to a lot of because they didn't feel like staying in Salem anymore, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, yeah, okay, we're not gonna, our neighbors just like stuck us in the, so they moved down to, it's in Framingham, Ashland, Massachusetts. Wow. So there's that's the Salem End Road, is this land that was gifted to a lot of these survivors. Wow. Of the persecution story. So.
Wow, Julie, that's so cool. Thank you.
I have some pictures. So when I went back one of the times, I brought a few, like we both work with Dharas quite a bit, right? So I brought a few, and I'll put some pictures if you want of like I brought them into the woods and just took some pictures there. And like there's the face, there was a lot. And there's like, I went to some stone outcroppings, like a lot of things came.
If you don't mind, maybe you can email me those and I'll insert them here at this point in the dialogue. That'd be great. Okay. Wow. Anything else?
On that thread or that story?
In general.
The general art of gridworking and what?
Yeah, anything you'd want to say.
Well, the whole, you talked about it in our pre-chat, is empowering the people who are watching this and to listen to, like, how does the question I get asked most often from new grid workers are like, how do I know what to do? Like, I want to be of service. I find myself wanting to be of service to humanity and to the planet and to the universe and to the ascension process. How do I know what to do? So I guess the thing we could say to everyone who's watching this is, like, whatever you do is perfect. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, oh, I picked up a pine cone, or there's a little thing that I have on my desk. This is like a piece of bark with moss on it. That's a little heart. Like you just, you get a talisman or two when you're in the woods, or you could, that's why some people stack rocks, or, we try not to alter the landscape too much, right? We just do it vibrationally. But that, maybe we could pivot to talking with that, right? If we want to empower the
Yeah.
people who are watching this
Yeah. I
should do
love
their
it.
own grid working. The people are like, well, I want, to be of service, or how do you know what to do when you
Mhm.
travel to where you go to, or, go into the woods?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there's two, in my experience to share, there's two ways. Like you say, you get a ping, like you get a call, a ping to go somewhere. So there's that, or I guess there's multiple ways. There's definitely more than two. Sorry. Um, if there's an event going on, like a great example would be, when the fires were really bad here on the West Coast. It was beautiful because everyone on my Facebook feed is just flooded with, prayers for water, all these beautiful intentions. And so for me, grid work is also a focused, intensive prayer, an intention. And when we combine our consciousness with that, they say when two or more gather, I mean, that's very powerful. So, our connection to the grid can really expand from there with our intention. And of course, we always do it in alignment with, with the divine, the highest and greatest of what is needed in the area of whatever's going on. But so natural disaster or any kind of a calamity is a great call a lot for me for service, because you can feel these streams of energy around an event like this. Like, you feel the animals that are running, you feel the trees that are burning, you feel the people who have or may lose their homes and their sadness. So you can feel all of these streams of energy. So what I like to do in a situation like that is tune in and feel all the streams that are going on around this event. It's almost like jello layers, like of energy. And then go within and hold my peace, hold my conscious intent and prayer of peace for these people, and safety, and whatever would be soothing. So kind of looking like using Ayurveda, balancing the qualities, what's presenting. And of course, this is like larger level, more macro kind of stuff. But it could be just going on a walk out in nature and just, this is one of my favorites. It's so simple. It's just the art of appreciation, of beauty, just getting called to go out on a walk. And while we're doing that, it's like the perfect symbiotic blend, because we are realigning our own grid architecture with the organic fields when we're outside. And then we're appreciating the beauty. And like earlier in the year, the trees at the sacred site where there's a beautiful indigenous sacred site here, they let me know that they love to be sung to. So I started singing to the trees, and then I started bringing, like, I have a crystal bowl. So I would bring that out and play for them, play that music, things like this. It's like, how often are people thinking of, can I gift nature with something? Or a native way that's really lovely is if you have tobacco, like a tobacco offering, organic tobacco to the ancestors of the land too. So those are some of the ways that I tune in and be of service. But I think for those who are just starting out, you already are a grid worker. The process that I would really just want to hit home here is embodying it within yourself. Work with your own grids and your own consciousness and your own trust in yourself that you know what you're doing, because you're called to do it. You already know what to do. You can't go wrong. And it's kind of funny because I think that's part of the nebulousness when we go online and people want to research something like that. You can't really get an exact answer. Well, what is grid work, And so we're sharing our experiences with you to try to make it more tangible. And something Julie said that I want to quote her on, this is really good, is that, we want everyone to know that it's not just, oh, I went to Shasta and I had this, incredible experience with inner people. It's not just these really extreme, glamorous examples. Those are great. And those are things we get called to do. It's lovely. But it's really an everyday process. So to bring that into a really mundane kind of local level here, we're talking about Halloween is coming. And so my daughter is, 11. So we love to celebrate the holidays. And part of our light work and our grid work is the decor, because everyone that comes by our home is lit up by the decorations, by the spirit. I mean, we've had so many compliments. We put our decorations out really early. We're like, it's 2020. We're not going to wait till October 1st. We're going to go with, we did it. I think it was like the 18th or something. So we put our decorations out, and that night I got so many compliments from neighbors saying, oh my gosh, I didn't think I'd see anything like that this year. And then there are 2 other neighbors that have Halloween decor up. So we have lit a little fire of the spirit of celebration, the spirit of, innocence and the magic of Halloween for me. So there's so many beautiful small things that we do on a daily basis. Or like you mentioned, Julie, going to the grocery store. Whenever we do our errands right now, you know, when we're masked up, you know, is holding that peace and that love and that compassion in your own grid system, meaning your own field, and you are that presence in the store. And in the beginning of the year, I did Instacart shopping for people when people were really, you know, freaked out about COVID and everything. And I would have elders come up to me in the store. And this is when it was pretty crazy. It's when it first started in March. And, you know, people were hoarding food and the shelves were bare. And I had elders come up to me while I'm pushing my cart saying, "Oh, is this the end of the world?" And I would just look at them and say, "No, it's going to be okay. You just keep smiling." You know, so it just shows you, like, in the moment, people gravitate towards you because they feel your light and they're trying to figure out, how can I find that? And that's part of, we are the grids. We carry it everywhere.
Like you being you and showing up at that grocery store, because you have choice points you get in your car. It's like, well, maybe not Instacart because maybe they're expecting you at a certain store. But for me, you know, I have 4 grocery stores that I get different things at around, you know, like lucky.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, which one do I dial into? You know, like what time of day do you get in the, you know, car to go do your errand or this or that?
That's right.
I jotted down a bunch of things as you were talking of like
Yeah.
how we get pinged or how we know what to do. Because I do find that that's the most common quandary or question that I get asked.
Really?
So dreams is a big one for me. I'll get a lot of like dream state, or, you know, just that lingering. Sometimes it's very lucid and vivid, and you get like, I call them instructions. You get callings by your own dream state, right? But signs for me, like signs are incredibly like a truck going by with a certain word on it, or that street sign. Like I'm a code reader and a code writer, but reading the code. So and for me, it's clouds are huge. Clouds, birds, trees, you know, the natural world, waterways. I think we share this, right? We're both water workers in things, but that even just like a certain, you know, if you talk about like, oh, you're going to go to whatever. I know our grocery stores. I used to live in California, so I'm like, what is it? Fred Meyer's, or our grocery stores out here are really different, but names. You know, you're going to go Stop and Shop out here. It's like you have like even 3 different routes you could take, right?
Yeah.
You can dial in and be like, oh, I'm going to take the one that goes by the lake, or I'm going to take the one that goes through the forest, or you know, through the city square, whatnot. But
awesome.
Even back to what you were talking about, to the land, or you were talking about the human, so that you were talking about reading also the human heart grid, which is that, like you were talking about with the fires in California, right? And how they, when you would go out on the land to, like, you know, listen to the land or to tune into what the earth needed from you as a grid worker in that moment, and then you do start to hear, like, you're listening to the collective, the human field is also a layer of that story. You know, some people, I don't love this term that much, but people call it the pain story on the land. You know, that's what working here, there's been a lot of slaughter, there's been a lot of, you know, indigenous people's lives lost and warfare and whatnot. So that shows up a lot in New England grid work, the stories, the layers of things, right? But it's also the humans that are alive here and now.
And what are they holding?
Feeling, thinking, where is their headspace, where's their heart space? And that shows up. You know, if we're going to weave it back to Ayurveda, I always think of it as the 5 element, you know, so we have the earth, the water, the air, just saying, I know you know these, but fire, air, and then the ether, right? So that it's going to show up it shows up for me because that's my kind of cosmology that I work with, or my governing paradigm. Like I'll get things like the waterways will give me different snippets of the information, but the air, in general, the human heart grid goes with the air element, right? And the heart chakra and whatnot, and the forest fields that pump from the human heart grid. So that, for me, that's like a lot comes through the clouds, even though that's a little water, but it's water and air, and the birds or wind or weather.
Awesome.
Sort of like tangential, but that you had talked about that. So I just wanted to be like, human heart grid. So that's, as you know, grid working is sometimes landscape, like more earth element. Sometimes it's like, you know, walking the land, and sometimes it's working with the water, the rivers, and sometimes it's literally fire, like what you just did, but also like colors, or, you know, to me the fire element, we go through 8 over 8 rules the eyes, right? So it's like the sight, the rainbow codes, and rays from the sun, like what's, you know, oh, it's an aqua kind of ray day, or it's a, you know, gold ray day, or that's like gives a lot of information on that level.
That's awesome.
And the air element is to me, like speaks with the human heart grid stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you, because I really appreciate you keep breaking it down. So thank you so much for that. It's like making it more like you bring it to earth, you know, making
And
it
then
more
you talked
solid.
about at the beginning when you were talking about the matrix, that is the crystalline, like to me, that's the Akashic, that's or in the body, the fascia.
Yeah.
I mean, like I call it in my classes, I call it that's the memory foam of the body. You know, that commercial, like you probably have the same first, where the girl has a glass of wine on the memory foam bed and she's jumping up and down, or they put in that same commercial, they put the hand on the memory foam bed, you know, and like the hand imprint stays.
Yes.
Like that's same, so that the ether element is like the memory foam of the body, or the memory foam of the earth body.
Yeah.
So like the Akashic, like it's literally the memory, and it gets like these imprints, like that handprint. Like there's little like grooves, patterns that stay, that we can, like, you know, sometimes we trip over them like potholes, or they're like in our own field. Those are those things like, oh, I just got all this body work out of my shoulder. It was so free. And like, oh, my neck and shoulder felt great after my, you know, month of sessions. And why does that come back? You know, like, why is it not cleared completely?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like the body, the planet, you know, it's like, oh, either you've gone to another layer of it, or it's like you kind of haven't filled in the pothole, or the, you know, the tendency in your own energy field. And it's similar with the earth grids. Like there are these tendencies that we like trip over again and again, like a scratch on a record of like, oh. Are you old enough to remember records? I know we're not the same era.
Yeah.
You used to get like the scratch in them, and they'd play that same little track of song over and over again. The earth grids have that kind of like, if there's like a rip or a tear or a scratch or a pothole, whatever, in the earth grids, that's part of grid working, is we call it like repair, but you know, you're driving around in the cement, you know, the truck with the asphalt, like filling in the potholes.
Patchwork
with light, with love, with joy, with crystal
gratitude,
energy.
right? Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, well, since you mentioned, you know, the pockets of memory, that's something that, well, okay, I thought of a few things. Thank you, that I wanted to share. Starting to just really come into, you know, a stillness within when you go outside. So come inside to go outside, meaning outside in nature, if you're called to different places, so you can start to really tune in to what is there. You know, an example of that was when I was, I think, 17. I was in Europe. I got to go on a Euro trip because my mom was a teacher, and we were in Normandy. And this was one of the most palpable experiences that I ever had. There was, you know, where the bombs were in Normandy, these huge pits. When you said pothole, it reminded me of this. Huge pits where the bombs were that you could walk inside, and it's like an inverted hill. And I remember it was so cool that you could amble around this site. And so I went down and into the pit and hung out there, and I could just feel a lot of kind of lost souls. There was sorrow. And I just had this visual, you know, come to me in my imagination of like putting a little lantern there, like an old school lantern in the middle, so they could find the light and then just go home. And I was just, you know, there in these pits, and just putting out there, just broadcasting through my thoughts, like a little antenna, like, oh, it's, you know, it's okay, and you can go home, just follow the light, you can go home. And because they were stuck in that space. So that's kind of an example of helping to unlock maybe something that's stuck there. But then there are other examples, like going out in nature on the sacred Shumash land. And again, you can feel the layers of the heart grids, where you can tune into a different time. And I've had these experiences where I'm walking barefoot on the ground, and I look, and it's I'm like a native person. It's like another life for me, or I'm not really sure specifically, but I see my feet as a native person walking barefoot, you know, on the dirt path with the leaves. And you can tune in through your heart center in that kind of a frequency of time, of space time, and see in your mind's eye the whole tribe there in the trees. And I'll see them, they're standing on the rocks, and they see us, you know, and they're standing there proudly and just like sending out like, this is our sacred way. It's a very Lemurian, you know, I feel like the Shumash definitely very Lemurian people here. So there's so many frequencies. Then you could go to another part of California and feel where, like you talked about, Julie, you know, where the natives were just literally paved over. I mean, all of Malibu is graveyard. All of that, all of the West Coast really is sacred graveyard that's just been, you know, paved over. So when I had that realization a few years back that the majority of the United States is a sacred burial ground in some form or another, in some time, space or another, is just putting that love and that gratitude and, you know, forgiveness and those kinds of frequencies into the land, into the ancients, because in addition to the planet and the elementals and the current collective heart grids, there's also the ancients, the ancestors, and I really love working with them. I really love connecting with them. I'm really passionate about that. And that's something I've done on many continents, just guided, you know, but they really appreciate it. And you could just talk to them.
Yeah, totally. Can I ping, like, so I have two things that ping.
Yes, please.
I love having conversations with you. So I will just say, like, to everyone, like, 17-year-old you knew what to do.
Yes.
You didn't take any grid worker
I
training
even think
courses.
about it.
You didn't,
No.
you just like, so anyone else watching, like, go back to your 10-year-old self, your 5-year-old self, your 17-year-old self. You already know what to do. And it's like, you could have imagined an old-fashioned lantern, you could have put a column of light, like you can't do it wrong, right? You're just like, your intention is pure and you're there.
Yes.
The right place at the right, every time is the right time, and every place
Absolutely.
is the place. But like, that was beautiful. Like, a 17-year-old you knew what to do.
Yeah.
But I have had that, you know, talking about the elders speaking.
Yes.
So I mostly have a, you know, like within an hour or so of my house, or 2 hours, that I go, you know, my local grids that I work with extensively, and the native tribes that have been here. And like, so I moved from a city, put it in quotes, Worcester's a city, it's a city, but like I moved into a couple towns over, which is more woodland. But I like was all of a sudden was hearing more and more from the native elders that were here on the land that my house is on and my business here is on too. And so I got familiar with that and did that for several years. And then I went down to Connecticut to most of my gridworking tales will talk about fish shows too, because like, you know, bands are like I went down to see fish last summer.
Nice.
Mohegan Sun, which is down, this is a different tribe, a different section of the land. But when I got there, Uncas is a native, like I had this, like I hadn't had it before because I was mostly been local, since I've been more aware of my own gridworking skills and doing it more actively and on purpose. But Uncas, the native elder from down there, was like, they were like in this almost like, oh my gosh, she can hear me. She can say, they were just like, like it was all this like, go here, go do this grave. I'm like, okay. But it was, I had one of those feelings of like, not that this, you know, like in Ghost Whisperer, that like, you know, have you seen that show?
No.
Jennifer Love Hewitt. Anyway, not that that happens to me like in a visceral, corporal way, but you know, so like the spirits will come and they'll be like, once they recognize that you can see them and hear them and interface with them, that opportunity, like that's the thing, right? Just to be there and be of open heart and spirit and listen. That's and then honor, you know, that's like, it's fun. So I feel like, oh, whenever it's, you know, I have little kids. I mean, I have an 11-year-old like you, but I have a 5-year-old too, which keeps me on a little bit of a tighter travel leash, you know, stay with her. But it's like, oh, you go to new places or you go to new sites. It's like that fun, just that pinged when you said about the native elders. Yeah, like you go, they're like, oh, they're ready and willing. The land is ready and willing to speak with you.
Oh, it's waiting, right?
It is. Yeah. They'll be like, pretty, like someone's here that wants to like acknowledge me. Like acknowledgement and awareness is the thing.
Yes. Oh, love it.
So you could pick up a pine cone and stack it on a rock, right? Or you could be like, oh, collect some like fall leaves or come in here. That's like, there's no pre-prescribed thing to do. And you don't even have to do a thing. You can just be there and be you. That's and right. Beam light and hold light, and that's the thing. Beautiful.
So I hope that this has helped simplify. It's like, it's so simple because like you say, it's just pure heart intent, and it can be as exciting and, you know, ritualistic and grandiose as you like. And sometimes, you know, when we have the portal gateways, larger cosmic happenings, I'll do more of a ritual kind of thing. But yeah, it's just being and enjoying and you know, being of authentic service and just kind of listening. And like another example, one day I was just like, I said to my daughter after a workshop, I said, we have to go to Shumash. And she's like, okay. And so this is an interesting example to show how each of us in our family units or our friends or community, we all get a different download. This is kind of cool. So I said, we have to go. I don't know why, we just have to go. And she's like, okay, mommy. So we get in the car and she's like, what do you think we're going to see? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if it's about seeing anything. I don't have any specifics yet, but I just know we need to go right now at this time frame. And she said, okay. And so we go, and I was really tired that day. I had a lot of ascension symptoms that day, but I just knew it would be helpful to get outside, and I was called. So I was like, okay, let's go, you know? So we walked all the way into this park, and then we were really exhausted and didn't want to go further. It was about sunset time. So we turned around, and I still had no idea why we were there. We turned around and we're exiting, and then all of a sudden Nanda says, mommy, look, there's a deer. And so we froze. And over in the side, you know, to our far right in a ravine was a deer. And then we looked, and there was a little open grassy area, and it was a mom with 3 younger baby deer. And it was beautiful. And so, see, I hadn't picked up on that there was going to be something to see. I just knew we needed to be, right? But my daughter knew that we were going to see something. And it was wonderful. And then on that note, you know, we were walking for a moment, and we scared one of the deer, and it left the little open grassy area and ran back into the ravine, kind of in the shade. And so me and my daughter kind of crouched down low, and we were really still. And I said to the deer, I said, oh, we're so happy to see you. And I'm so sorry that I frightened you, but you are among friends. You know, we are stewards of the earth here. We support you. We love you and cherish you. And it's safe to come back if you would like to continue to eat. I'm so sorry we interrupted your meal, but you need to eat, you know, because we're still in this drought season. There weren't a whole lot of little grassy nibbles for them. No joke. A few seconds later, it came out of the ravine and went back to the grassy area to eat. And so that's just another thing I wanted to share, is you can talk to the animals from just soft, they can feel you, you know, all the animals, the birds, they're very sensitive. And you can communicate with them openly like that, and just, you know, be still and respectful and kind of blend into the environment. And it's really magical.
Did you say that out loud, or were
Yes,
you doing it
I
quietly?
did. I
But
did.
that's like that moment of teaching your daughter, like that's just like, that's how we're doing it too, right? Like we have next generation grid workers that we live with too, and like it's just by example or by tangible on the job training.
Yeah.
Ones, right? But that's what I was seeing as you were telling that story. I'm like, what a blessing for her too, to just see it live in action. Right?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Aww.
Yeah. So, you know, beautiful experiences, you know, just expect the beauty and the magic and whatever's coming up. You know, it's just such an exciting time. And I know that for decades before us, grid workers were working on anchoring the higher frequencies into the planet. So, you know, the cleanup really, from what I understand, is over. It's more about embodying the higher frequencies. New Earth is here now. All those grids are here now. It's just a matter of decluttering, opening, surrendering, you know, looking at where we have resistance and walking through and embodying it here and connecting with it and being a coordinate point, you know. And that's what's so fun about us being on the opposite coasts here. Julie does beautiful work with the waterways and the ocean. So it's like, okay, we've got Atlantis and we've got Lemurian, and we're hybridizing here, for lack of a better term, just connecting the whole grid of Northern America.
Let's do one of our chats, which I would love to do this monthly or whatever, regularly with you. Yeah. But let's do because I have a lot to say about that piece of the cross-continent.
Okay.
Solar eclipses and pathways, and there's a whole gateway that is happening with all that. But that's
do you want? I mean, we're like, do you want to talk about it?
No, I feel like it would be great. Like I was gonna say, like this, because our intention for this call, right, this time.
You know me, I want to do it all. Okay.
No, I know, was to speed this, but I'm saying, like, you know, you talked about it's not every trip is like a journey up the mountain,
Exactly.
with the stars, with some, those, we'll talk about those too, though, because those are fun.
Yes,
And those
because
are
they
really
are
inspiring.
fun.
We both have
Yes,
those kind of tales to tell too.
absolutely.
And it would be great to share those too. But we really
Okay.
wanted to like start up, like we were laying our foundation today, right?
Yes, you're right. Yes, we are. Okay, so next time, guys, we'll talk more. We'll talk more about, the however you want to phrase it. Every word I think of isn't really descriptive enough, but just the more grandiose, grid work, gate
Well,
work
it could be,
experience.
well, I think they're culmination things.
Mhm.
Because for me, what I feel like, here's another good one of like for
Okay.
people.
Okay.
Like for me myself, if I go back to like when I first started actively working as a grid worker, you, in the moment that you're doing stuff, you don't necessarily know what you're doing. Like it's layers upon layers. A lot of the work, it's like culmination moments.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just had a pretty grandiose time the last 3 or 4 days over equinox here, but it was 3-4 years in the making of
Wow. Yeah.
layers of work with
Yeah.
that same even with the same sites. And sometimes you'll start and you'll be like, I think this is a common thing that the human ego or the human mind constructs for us, is like, well, I just went for a walk in the woods, I didn't really do anything. Like, am I really doing anything? Is any of
Right.
this real? Am I
Right.
doing it? So you don't, and you can have things, you can go to a certain lake, you can be called to like a certain lake or a certain river and do things, or build a crystal grid, or like have, be with that. And you still have done that, but you might not know what you're doing while you're doing it. And you might not know for 6 months or a year. And you're like, oh, that's what I was doing like 2.5 years ago when I went to blah, blah, blah,
Thank you for saying that. It
So
takes
it
the
really
thinking out.
layers,
Yeah.
it layers on. So don't ever
Yeah.
think you're not doing something or that you're
Yeah.
not doing it right. Know that you are there for a reason and a purpose, even if that reason and purpose is not immediately apparent. But you were saying like the grandiose. So for me, sometimes I'll have these culmination moments rather than, we'll say that instead of grandiose, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm like,
Thank you.
oh, like
Yeah.
these aha bursts. And it often is timed, they happen anytime, but like sometimes it's with an equinox or a solstice, sometimes it's with a moon or a planetary alignment. We'll talk, I'm kind of a star space geek. So a
I
lot of
love it.
things
I
happen for
love
me in like, I'm like, oh, it's like, oh, Mars and Venus, or like across, like some, whatever that thing is. Like they'll happen at gateways and we'll have these epic moments.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, you've laid down the work, month after month, year after year, and then they culminate.
Beautiful.
Blossom, right? Like
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because that's really important to know, is that we're kind of deprogramming our linearity, our understanding that everything is a linear understanding. And so we talk about, we are literally embodying the information, and the body has to digest it. And so everything has to line up code wise internally for us to then have a mental cognitive, like, that's what I was doing. So the body has to digest the information. So be patient. Even if you don't really know, you will, right? And it's important to know. Another thing you reminded me I wanted to share is that, on these larger cosmic events, while we still have duality playing out, we know that whenever we have huge gateways and portals of higher frequency energy, like the equinox would be an example, that same energy, because again, this is 0 point energy, it's scalar, it's the force, right? It could go either way. Intention is either way. So for me personally, I really like to emphasize on these portals and gateways just the light, the gratitude, appreciation, peace for all people, abundance for all people, new earth, all the codes, freedom codes, with these with these concentrations of energy. That energy is used for creative purposes, in alignment, divine, because it could be used both ways. And there are, we do have like the wizards, the dark wizards behind the curtain, that like to use those energy portals for other things. And that's a very 3D concept, but just to share another example of grid work or gate work, those who are called to that kind of stuff is neutralizing, without resistance to, nefarious use of energies, but just a concentrated focus on the opposite, on the purity. So just to share that. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't It's interesting. It's cool to have conversations with other people that do this work too, because it's like that's never occurred to me, or I don't like in a respectful way. I was like, I don't really pay any attention to that. Not that I don't pay attention to that, like the wizards. I've just, but another way to say what you said is like you just have to align with the highest. In every moment, or that. But it's like we all have different. That's maybe the point of like not like we all have different jobs, if you will. We all have different callings. And just because like Marissa is called to do A and Julie's called to do C and Bob is called to do B, it doesn't mean like Marissa's, that's task is raw. It's just like we're all seeing it from different vantage points. We all have different roles to play and missions to work with. And
for me it's not, it's like, I don't know, it's hard to figure out how to say it properly, but just, it comes to my knowledge through others that that sometimes, and you can see it here's an example of this in action. So in the UK on the equinox, the control systems crank down even more. So they're trying
stuff, you mean, or what control systems?
In the UK, like all of the lockdown, they
COVID related stuff.
Yes. Okay. They tightened their restrictions even more with a lot of stuff. And so people, in that area were looking at this like, well, this is, usually they're at Stonehenge and they're doing all these beautiful things. And they're, instead what's being broadcast mainstream is, oh no, now you've got a curfew and, it's looking like this long. And so that's how I come into awareness of like how interesting that, the prime minister would use that morning of the equinox to say that. It's like there's no coincidences with that, so that's all I mean. I don't
okay, that's you could put that like in maybe on the equinox, like you're part of the team, that role is like stabilizing or
that's right,
coding, if you will, like keeping the equalizing and then like other people's roles might be more purging. I know a lot of people are purging this equinox.
Oh my gosh, yes, like absolutely.
Physically in their body forms, and then other people's roles are conducting.
Yes.
So it's like we're all on the same
beautiful
team light.
And that can change, and for me, like it'll change usually I'm a conductor, and ever since I was little I was just had this like, you're just supposed to hold the light down, just hold the light down, and I was like, okay, and I never knew what that meant other than just loving and just being a loving being, just holding it. And it's like even cilantro we're talking about, we're all beams of light, just beam,
But that, like, for me, like it didn't enter my awareness field, like that news story didn't make its way to me, but it made its way to you, and it was very meaningful for you. And then there was like action steps of your soul to like, oh, I'm supposed to be supporting and equalizing and
just keep focusing on what we're focusing on,
whatever people are watching this, if we're helping them unlock or remember their own innate gridworking knowledge, right? Because it's in there. It's like what you get caught, what you notice, and what comes into your field of awareness, that's what's yours.
Ping! That's like so succinct right there. That's the perfect way. Thank you, Julie. It's the perfect way to know. What do I do? Well, what's in there?
Like let go of the whole, Marissa's focusing on what's going on at Stonehenge. How come I'm not, I'm just noticing like what the people I help mentor and my own inner self, like I've learned over the years, but that voice, that nagging, I think the biggest obstacle anyone would have to unlocking their own innate grid working skills is self-doubt.
I agree.
And so it's like, oh, I should have been paying attention. Oh, that's what we were supposed to do on equinox. We were supposed to A plus B plus C. It's like, no. You were supposed to do what you were supposed to do on equinox. I was supposed to do what I was supposed to do on equinox. And those are both.
And they're both right.
And
it's like the prime directive is an internal, So thank you for that. Yeah.
Make it so.
yes.
Okay. Card style.
Yeah, and so the funny thing about that is that about that with that equinox intel with the UK, I didn't know about it until a few days ago, and so that was a retroactive, just like, oh wow, okay, so there are still some factions in other dimensional realms of thinking that are trying to use these energies for their purposes, which may not be service to others. So that's interesting, but I'm service to others, you know, and so there you could do a retroactive because time space is, you know, it's flexible. You know, just keep, you know, focusing even more, for lack of better term, like focus harder, you know, on the light and just like radiating that out, you know, just saying, you know, that's silly, you know, we're over here, you know, just to share that too. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this chat today. It's like such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. We could talk forever. We could talk forever. And so I just want to thank everyone who, if you're still here, you know, this far in, thank you, because it's so lovely to share intel. Yeah. And thank you so much. And Julia, I didn't want to forget, can you let people know where to find you online?
Oh, sure. So I'm here in Massachusetts. My center is called Inner Space. So I have a Facebook page that's Inner Space. And I'm on Facebook. That's one way. I have a website, which is innerspacehealing.org.
Great.
And I have a Gridworker dedicated website also that's called thesoulplanet.org, because I wanted to keep, you know, my tales of gridworking. And I'm gonna, now that I have a little more free time and people are with like kids rule our day-to-day, my day-to-day class, but I'm like really gonna lean into the Soul Planet work, because it just, I feel like for this very reason to just like write up tales. I feel like for Gridworkers too, for myself, like I'll have this epic, like, you know, that Salem story I talked about, but that was in August, like mid-August. And like by now I've had like 3 or 4 other like fun epic things that have happened in the last week. And like to get to write stuff up is like, sometimes you're just like onto the next job or onto the next thing, right? But I've been called for myself. I really enjoy the process of writing. That's another commonality that you and I have. But like, I feel like that's, how can I help and empower, I'll call them the up and coming, or like every grid worker on the planet, is just, I think the more we tell our tales and share, it's not like you're going to do it the way I do it, but just hearing like, oh, like hearing you go to the forest and the deer, it's like, that's going to help people unlock their own innate codes and their own innate. So that's my pledge to myself. And then to like service too, is to do more mentoring in that way of like writing stuff up. And so I have some stuff on there for sure from the last few years, but I'm going to pump it full of content.
Is it SOUL?
Yes.
Like our soul? Okay, so soul.
Soul Planet.
Okay, beautiful. Yay, and I'll have Julie's details in the description box below if you guys want to check out her stuff. Her writing's beautiful, and she's got great photos of working with the Andaras, beautiful activations, and just so much. And so, yeah, so I thank you guys for tuning in. And we're going to do this every month because we feel like, well, whether it's the weather or, you know, whatever's happening globally, or who knows, you know, things beyond our imagination right now, it's nice to check in month to month and connect, you know, connect.
Can I reciprocate and ask you to do your things too? Because I'm going to put them on my site, and not everyone that's going to see this, we're like cross-pollinating our people. So we need to know your stuff too, please.
Oh yes, thank you. So I'm Marissa Indigo, and I have a divinednablueprint.com. It's a great way to find me. And I have a mastery school on there as well. Marissa Indigo on YouTube, or Marissa Indigo on Facebook. And yeah, just, you know, all about sharing our experiences and all of that we've been studying to get to this point right now. And for me, my whole calling since I was a little kid is all about the human potential, and realizing that that's, you know, immediately linked with the ascension process of our expansion of conscious awareness and our connection. And more lately, my focus has been on embodiment and how do we bring that through from the inside. So yeah. So thank you. And thank you, Julie. And thank you, everybody.
Marissa. Thank you.
All right.
Until we meet again.
Until we meet again.
So much love.
Thank you. Much love.